I am the only daughter of the wealthiest family in the capital, yet while distributing porridge to the poor, I caught the eye of the imperial consort's wayward younger brother. The consort, all smiles, bestowed upon us an imperial marriage decree. When I refused, she simply smiled wider and ordered her matron to drive needles into all 10 of my fingers. This concubine doesn't disdain your lowly merchant origins, yet you dare refuse me, even if your family possesses boundless wealth. In this concubine's eyes, you're merely an ant. After being forced into marriage, my parents were framed and beaten to death, while our family fortune was seized by my husband. Even I was falsely accused of adultery and subjected to the pig cage punishment. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day the imperial concubine summoned me to the palace. This time, I secretly climbed onto the emperor's bed. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. The agony of being forcibly drowned in a pig cage swept through my entire body, filthy water flooding my nostrils and rushing into my mouth. Surrounded by darkness, the sound of flowing water was like a deathly howl, suffocating and unbearable. The feeling of helpless struggle was so vivid it drove one to despair. I know I am walking towards death. I still remember, just 3 months ago. I was the only daughter of the capital's wealthiest family, raised amidst boundless pampering and adoration. But overnight, my parents were framed and beaten to death, our family fortune falling into others' hands. Even I myself was falsely accused of adultery, denied even the right to speak in my own defense, before being thrown into the pig cage, and all of this was merely because of a single marriage decree issued by the imperial concubine Shujilian, 3 months ago. A great disaster struck Shuju, leaving countless refugees displaced and fleeing to the capital. My Shan family has always been renowned for benevolence, so naturally, we contributed grain and arms. My parents have always doted on me and wouldn't let me go personally. I only went once on a whim. Who would have thought that this very incident would inadvertently provoke Shu Guangyi, the beloved younger brother of the noble consort? Everyone knew that Shu Guangyi was a notorious playboy in the capital, spending his days carousing in brothels, teasing cats and dogs, and relying on his sister's protection to run rampant through the city, snatching virtuous women and beating commoners to death. Yet no matter what he did, without exception, his sister would shield him from consequences, making Shu Guangyi grow ever more brazen. The daughters of respectable families in the capital all kept as far away from him as possible. Yet such a person actually set his sights on me, even going so far as to have the noble consort bestow a marriage decree upon us. I remember clearly how Shu Jilian summoned me into the palace, beaming as she decreed the marriage between me and Shu Guangyi. She said Shu Guangyi had finally asked her for a favor, and in her delight, she had agreed. Then she asked if I would consent. I shook my head and refused. She then smiled sweetly as the matron drove needles into all 10 of my fingers. This consort doesn't scorn your lowly merchant origins, yet you dare refuse. Even if your family possessed mountains of gold, in this consort's eyes, you're nothing but an ant. That was the first time in over 10 years I'd suffered such profound humiliation and pain. I was confined within the palace walls, tormented relentlessly for 3 full days and nights before being released home. On my wedding day, the banquet that should have been filled with joyous celebration fell deathly silent. With only Shu Jilian and Shu Guangyi laughing brightly amidst the gloom, my parents seemed to age a decade in an instant. Their backs stooped as they begged me to take good care of myself. I thought this was already the worst fate I could suffer. Little did I know, my parents would meet with misfortune one after another, and all our family's wealth would fall into Shu Guangyi's hands. I wanted to seek justice for them, swallowing my pride to fawn over Shu Guangyi, only to be thoroughly humiliated by him. He came before me with his new lover in his arms, boasting triumphantly about how effortlessly he had acquired my family's vast fortune. He said at first it was merely my appearance that caught his eye, and Shu Jilian casually waved his hand to bestow me upon him in marriage. Later, when he grew tired of me, he set his sights on my family's wealth. Shu Jilian then fabricated a random charge and had my parents beaten to death. I was thunderstruck. Struggling to enter the palace to see Shu Jilian, the woman still maintained her haughty demeanor. Hearing my curses, she let out a cold sneer, looking utterly disdainful. Just 2 lowly commoners, dead or alive. Why should this princess trouble herself over them? Shu Jilian, you beast! Unable to contain my anger, I opened my mouth and cursed at her. Shu Jilian's expression changed abruptly, ordering someone to slap my face and trample me underfoot. The agony of having my hand crushed still felt vivid as I was dragged back to the Shu residence like a dead dog. Had the emperor not impulsively visited Shu Jilian's palace, I would have likely become fertilizer for her garden flowers. Yet unexpectedly, on the third day after being sent back, I was falsely accused of adultery and subjected to the pig cage punishment. I died, killed by Shu Jilian and Shu Guangyi, on the 7th day after my parents' death, but heaven took pity on me. And I came back to life. I returned to the day Shu Jilian summoned me to the palace, gazing at the stunning woman reclining on the chaise longue. Shu Jilian remained as haughty and disdainful as ever, looking down on everyone. "Raise your head and let me have a look." Shu Jilian seemed in high spirits, as if teasing a cat. I obeyed and lifted my head, watching her expression shift just as it had in our past life. After flickering through various emotions, it finally settled into a faint smile. She is indeed quite beautiful, though she said so, one could almost hear her teeth grinding in jealousy. In the Imperial harem, the noble consort enjoyed the emperor's greatest favor, all thanks to that exquisite face of hers. Yet time flows relentlessly, and beauty fades with age. The noble consort, after all, was growing old. My youthful beauty gave her a sense of crisis. "No wonder Guangyi likes you," Shu Jilian then spoke, as if in a past life, looking at me with condescending favor. "In that case, shall I bestow upon you two a marriage?" She went on talking to herself. Shu Guangyi rarely asked favors of her, so this time he must truly fancy me, going so far as to personally plead before her. She kept saying how much Shu Guangyi cared for me, but I knew all too well over the years I wasn't the only one who had caught his attention. When I didn't respond, Shu Jilian's expression turned cold, her gaze sharp and dangerous as it settled on me. "Will you agree?" As soon as I spoke, everyone turned to look at me. I slowly raised my head, feigning flattered surprise, and put on a bright smile. It would be this humble girl's great fortune to receive a marriage arrangement bestowed by the noble consort. "Someone as esteemed as your highness must surely have a younger brother like Master Shu, who is undoubtedly handsome in appearance and upright in character." I poured out flattery sentence after sentence, pushing sycophancy to its extreme, as if I were truly a petty person eager to climb the social ladder by currying favor with the powerful. Watching Shu Jilian shift from initial indifference to satisfaction, then to disdain, gradually beginning to look down on me, I knew then that she had let her guard down. She believed I genuinely wanted to marry Shu Guangyi. After all, in her eyes, looking down on Shu Guangyi was the same as looking down on her. But Shu Jilian's joy didn't last long before a young eunuch entered and whispered a few words in her ear. The moment the servant withdrew, Shu Jilian's face darkened with a twisted expression. She struggled to contain herself but ultimately failed, violently sweeping everything off the table onto the floor. That empress, that wretched woman. It was only when the maid beside her reminded her that she realized I hadn't left yet, and her expression changed again. Shu Jilian struggled to maintain her composure, forcing a smile as if nothing had just happened. "Since you both have feelings for each other, let's set the date sooner rather than later." With that, she had the maid escort me out. I sneered inwardly. Things were truly different now. In my past life, she had vented all her anger at the emperor's absence on me. "Your Highness." Just as I was about to leave, I suddenly spoke up and pulled something from my sleeve. "This humble girl believes this item may relieve your Highness's 1,000 sorrows." That was a priceless beauty-preserving elixir, rumored to make one look 10 years younger. There was only one of its kind in this world. In my previous life, after enduring Shu Guangyi's harassment for days, I was suddenly summoned to the palace, fearing misfortune might befall me. My parents prepared many things for my protection. Among them, this very pill was meant to curry favor with Shu Jilian. What a pity, in my past life, I hadn't even gotten the chance to speak before becoming the target of her wrath. Shu Jilian indeed took the bait, eagerly snatching the medicine from me. Hearing me extol the virtues of the medicine, she absent-mindedly touched her face, nearly swallowing it on the spot, but the next moment, she suddenly grabbed my chin, narrowing her eyes suspiciously. "If this medicine truly has miraculous effects, why aren't you using it yourself? Or perhaps it serves another purpose?" My body trembled slightly as I cautiously lifted my gaze to meet hers. "Your Highness is most perceptive. All medicines carry some toxicity." The merchant claimed this elixir could preserve one's youth for 10 years, maintaining a maiden's appearance, but those who take it would find it difficult to conceive. Shu Jilian froze momentarily before releasing her grip on my chin. I knew she believed it, and her heart was swayed too. But for women in the palace, beauty and offspring are both indispensable, an impossible choice to make. When I saw the Imperial physician enter, I knew Shu Jilian's heart had already leaned toward beauty. "Your Highness, this medicine does have miraculous effects, But it harms the body and may make it difficult to conceive in the future. The moment the physician spoke, Xu Zhilian believed it even more. She held the medicine and examined it repeatedly. This normally audacious person had never hesitated like this before. In the end, she swallowed it in one gulp with a grave expression. I knew no one could resist this temptation. The moment she swallowed it, Xu Zhilian eagerly had someone bring her a bronze mirror. She got her wish to see herself in the mirror, and the hushed gasps of the palace maids and matrons around her only fueled her pride. Xu Zhilian delightedly caressed her own face, utterly lost in admiration. Once she had admired herself enough, she summoned garments and jewelry to try on, piece by piece. No sooner had she finished dressing than she eagerly rushed out the door. "Nanny, quickly, let's go see the emperor." Xu Zhilian was so excited she lost some of her usual imperial concubine dignity, only thinking about intercepting His Majesty who was planning to visit the empress. Noticing me standing nearby, she seemed to suddenly remember my presence and looked at me with evident pleasure. "This item pleases me greatly. Name your reward. You may ask for anything you wish." I feigned alarm and knelt down to express my gratitude, overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. Hesitantly, with a touch of pettiness in my tone, "Your Highness, this humble girl has traveled far and wide since childhood, yet never have I seen such a magnificent and splendid palace. I wish to take a stroll through its halls." As if to make amends, I quickly spoke up, my face flushing red. "If it doesn't work, that's all right. This medicine was originally just a humble offering from this common girl to your Highness. Being able to assist your Highness is this girl's good fortune." After hearing me out, Xu Zhilian let out a derisive laugh, her tone dripping with disdain. "This consort thought you wanted something important. How petty. This consort grants your request." With that, she casually pointed to a palace maid and instructed her to show me around. She was in such high spirits that, fearing one day wouldn't be enough, she even permitted me to stay longer in the palace. Naturally, I expressed my profuse gratitude. Watching her cheerful departing figure, I lowered my head and slowly curved my lips upward. Opportunities to enter the palace were rare. I simply had to seize this one. Xu Zhilian assigned me a palace maid named Tsueyu, who dutifully showed me around the nearby areas. I took out the mutton-fat white jade from my person and quietly slipped it into her palm. "Sister Tsueyu, I truly don't wish to trouble you further. Why don't you tell me about the palace affairs and let me wander on my own, so as not to accidentally offend any nobles?" The jade was made of the finest material. After only a brief hesitation, Tsueyu agreed. "The Imperial Garden is the most beautiful spot. But remember, young lady, you must never try to cut corners. There are many noble figures there." It wasn't until the end that Tsueyu finally got to the point. I nodded with a smile, but after she left, I turned and headed straight for the Imperial Garden. Everyone knows our current emperor is virtuous and talented, outstanding in ability, with only two passions, his love for flowers and his love for beautiful women. Thus, the newly arrived beauties in the palace, or even the somewhat attractive maids, inevitably frequented the Imperial Gardens. Even the Empress, whose favor was about to be snatched away tonight, had only managed to secure a moment of imperial grace by using the excuse of rare flowers to admire. The Empress and His Majesty had been wed by the late Emperor's decree, lacking any genuine affection from the start, and they had only one princess to their name. Moreover, with her fading beauty over the years and the constant influx of fresh faces in the palace, the Emperor's preference for beauty left her with few opportunities to regain his favor. Thus, the imperial consort dared to trample wantonly over the Empress's head. After great pains to find exotic flowers, she had originally intended to mend her relationship with His Majesty, yet little did she expect that tonight, His Majesty would only love the beauty more. In the Imperial Garden, Xu Zhilian was indeed there. Seated across from a man clad in bright yellow dragon robes, presumably the current emperor, Xiao Junchen, I stared fixedly at the other person, committing his appearance firmly to memory. Watching the two of them chatting happily, I didn't approach but instead turned away from the Imperial Garden with a faint smile. Spotting a eunuch sweeping by the roadside, I took off my gold bracelet and whispered a few words in his ear. Seeing his initial hesitation gradually give way to temptation before he finally dashed off filled me with immense satisfaction. Though I knew full well that His Majesty would stay by Xu Zhilian's side tonight no matter what. First, her beauty was indeed useful. Second, it was novelty. Third, there was youthful affection. These were more than enough to pique His Majesty's interest in Xu Zhilian, but nothing could please me more than to throw obstacles in Xu Zhilian's path. I had the little eunuch inform the Empress she should soon learn of Xu Zhilian's actions, having been intercepted by the noble consort. The empress must be displeased at heart, yet she must maintain her composure outwardly. But Xu Zhilian will certainly not yield, on the contrary, she will flaunt it ostentatiously, even to the point of publicizing it. As for His Majesty, he will only feel a twinge of guilt toward the empress. But this faint trace was enough for the empress to trace it back to me. The day after the noble consort served the emperor, as expected, she couldn't resist flaunting it everywhere, especially before Her Majesty the Empress. When Xu Zhilian returned, she sneered at the empress's weakness with her old nursemaid. Looking at her arrogant demeanor that disregarded everyone, I smiled faintly. The sooner Xu Zhilian rejoiced, the quicker she would meet her tragic end. That afternoon, while I was idly strolling, I was secretly taken to the empress's palace. I heard you presented a medicinal pill to the noble consort. The queen was quite different from what I had imagined, dressed in a simple, elegant skirt, serene and composed, with the scent of sandalwood wafting through the palace. At first glance, she seemed like someone who neither fought nor contended, indifferent to fame and fortune. Yet, quite the opposite. If the queen truly didn't care, she wouldn't have summoned me to appear before her. I played dumb, answering blankly, reporting to your highness. This commoner did indeed present medicine. But this medicine, I feigned embarrassment, adopting an expression of flustered fear. There was only this single pill. The empress suddenly burst into laughter. I wasn't seeking you out for medicine. Moreover, wasn't it you who wished to see me? As she spoke, she had someone bring out that golden bracelet identical to the one I'd given the little eunuch, or rather, it was the very same one I'd given the little eunuch. Your highness jests. With a faint smile, I shed my timidity and met the empress's gaze directly. The daughter of the current prime minister, Zhuang Mingyu, once the capital's foremost talented maiden, indeed brilliant. Otherwise, she wouldn't have maintained her position as empress, wielding the phoenix seal. Amidst so many beauties in the palace, the queen looked at me with great interest and spoke. Aren't you afraid that I might hold you accountable for this? I shook my head, remaining composed. Even without the noble consort, there would still be the Duan consort, the Liang consort, or the Li consort. Your Majesty is magnanimous. How could you possibly blame me for such a matter? Moreover, though His Majesty did not come, at least Her Majesty achieved her purpose, did she not? It was said that after bestowing gifts upon Xu Zhilian, His Majesty also recalled General Zhuang from Shu province. Then I understood why the Empress had gone through such pains to procure those flowers, just to catch a glimpse of the Emperor. A plague was raging in Shu province, driving all the common folk to flee. Yet not a single general was permitted to return to the capital. Everyone knows this is His Majesty's will, like Xu Zhilian. The Empress also has a younger brother, the current young flying general, Zhuang Tsushu. He and Xu Guangyi are complete opposites. Where Xu Guangyi is utterly worthless, he excels remarkably, having achieved numerous military feats at such a young age. But precisely because of this, His Majesty was quite wary of the Zhuang family. As for Empress Zhuang Mingyu, he rarely showed her favor, because he feared that the Empress might bear a son. Hearing my words, the Empress smiled. You're quite clever indeed. Speak then, what brings you to seek me out? Seeing the Empress smile, I smiled too. Your Majesty, this humble girl wishes to climb the dragon bed. Perhaps stunned by my blunt words, the Empress remained silent for a long while, her face flickering between shock and suspicion. She looked straight at me, her gaze scrutinizing and contemplative. I have no other advantages, only this face worth a glance. My family holds no power, only enough gold and silver. With a smirk, I turned to the Empress, watching the tremor in her eyes. That was all the confirmation I needed. I vaguely remember that in my past life, when I died, Xu Guangyi and Xu Zhilian were still scheming their embezzlement. The plague grew increasingly severe, and the Imperial treasury was running short of funds. Even when allocations were made, substantial portions were skimmed off both openly and covertly. If Xu Zhilian were to have Xu Guangyi withdraw all of my Shen family's wealth at this moment, it would undoubtedly relieve His Majesty's pressing needs and earn his admiration, paving the way for smoother prospects ahead. As for the plague, only a handful were aware of its true scale. Most believed it would soon pass. Those who knew the truth included, naturally, His Majesty, as well as the Empress, who was the daughter of the Chancellor. At my words, the Queen's gaze darkened. After a long silence, she relented. This consort can only deliver you to His Majesty's side. As for the rest, it depends on your own fortune. How could I not know this already? Now that Xu Zhilian enjoys the Emperor's favor, how easy would it be to snatch someone from her grasp? What's more, I can only stay in the palace for 2 days. After much hesitation, I took advantage of the night and went alone to the Imperial garden. The Empress once told me that His Majesty's favorite is a red peony in the Imperial garden. The peony was rather gaudy and quite ordinary, yet it had been personally planted by His Majesty, a fact known to few. Thus, His Majesty would stop to look at it whenever he passed by, and to reach Shu Jilian's palace, one had to pass through the Imperial garden. After much searching, I finally found that red peony in a secluded corner, amidst the dazzling array of vibrant flowers competing for attention. The peony appears unremarkable and ordinary, no wonder few know of His Majesty's fondness for it. During the day, I deliberately had the sunlight blocked, so the buds that should have closed at night remain in bloom. I tactfully declined the Empress's suggestion to place me directly by His Majesty's side. After all, even if I were to gain His Majesty's favor, being known as the Empress's protégé would diminish its purity and add unwelcome implications. I held an exceptionally bright lantern over the flowers, dancing gracefully while counting the seconds. From afar, it looked as though the blossoms had bloomed because of my dance, listening to the faint murmurs nearby. I curled the corners of my lips and crouched down as all the flowers fully opened. Lowering my eyes, I feigned sorrow. "Oh flowers, flowers, I can make you bloom, yet I cannot save more lives. Nowadays, there are more and more displaced people. It's a pity that with my meager strength, I can do nothing." Then, changing my tone, I spoke with deep reverence. Fortunately, His Majesty is wise and sagacious. Surely, it won't be long before peace reigns under heaven, and everyone can live a good life. Flowers, you were born here, so bloom beautifully for me and thank His Majesty on my behalf. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard a sound behind me. "And who might you be?" At the sight of the bright yellow dragon robe, my heart fluttered with panic, and I quickly knelt down. Yet, I couldn't help but cautiously raise my head, my gaze filled with reverence. "Your Majesty, this humble girl is the daughter of merchant Shan Ruojin." Meeting Xiao Junchen's eyes, I deliberately averted my gaze in feigned shyness, the blush on my cheeks betraying the unspoken feelings of a young maiden's heart. Xiao Junchen's prolonged silence told me he recognized me, or rather, he recognized the Shan family. After all, my Shan family was the wealthiest in the capital, with businesses spanning the land, and would donated generously during military campaigns. "So you're a daughter of the Shan family?" Xiao Junchen curled his lips slightly, his gaze upon me clearly filled with admiration. "What brings you to the palace? I see worry written all over your face. Do you need my help?" he asked casually, as if it were of no consequence. I lowered my brows, hesitating to speak. As if sensing my hesitation, Xiao Junchen spoke gently. "Speak freely. Without worry, I shall decide for you." I bit my lip, striving to present myself as fragile yet most pitiable, my tears falling at will. "I beg your Majesty to decide for me. This humble girl already has someone in her heart. Though young Master Shu is of noble status and has such a wonderful elder sister as the noble consort, I truly cannot bring myself to marry him. If I cannot marry the one I love, I would rather become a nun." Xiao Junchen helped me up and signaled for me to continue. I embellished the story, spinning a tale about Shu Guangyi's covetous intentions toward me. At the end, I casually mentioned again that Shu Jilian knew about my family background and had seen how delighted I was when presenting gifts. The wolfish ambition is plain to see, yet under my narration, one would only think they coveted my beauty, a beauty in tears, with uncommon looks, an innocent nature, and the charm of flowers and moonlight exceptionally moving. Even the eunuch by His Majesty's side showed pity on his face. When Shu Guangyi mentioned the dowry of 100,000 taels of silver and 10,000 taels of gold, Xiao Junchen's face instantly darkened, especially when I said that it was originally the disaster relief funds the Shan family had prepared to donate. "Miss Shan, do not fear, I, the Emperor, shall stand by you and grant you a marriage to the one you love." As he spoke, Xiao Junchen still seemed somewhat regretful. After all, beauty and wealth could have been obtained together. But now I must relinquish them because of my earlier words. My face flushed as I corrected his phrasing. "The one this humble woman admires is, if your Majesty would deign to intervene, sparing this humble woman from marrying young Master Shu would suffice. The one this humble woman admires, she dares not hope for." I spoke while watching Xiao Junchen hesitate to speak, eventually lowering my gaze with feigned sorrow yet deliberately suggestive. "Sure enough," Xiao Junchen finally spoke up. "Who is the one you fancy?" Biting my lip, I slowly began to speak under his intense gaze. "Yes, it was 2 years ago, the Imperial envoy who went to Jinju, he saved this humble girl's life, but I've never been able to find his trail since. indeed impossible to find after all. Who could know the emperor's whereabouts? 2 years ago, I traveled to Jinju with my parents. While resting at a tavern, I happened to encounter Xiao Junchen during his secret excursion. At that time, I simply didn't know he was His Majesty, veiled in white gauze. I passed by him face to face as he held flowers in his arms. Just as he was about to leave, a drunkard approached, attempting to lift the white veil from my face. Perhaps on a whim, Xiao Junchen stepped in to help. I hadn't even had the chance to thank them before they hurried off on urgent business. I'd completely forgotten about this incident until the Empress casually mentioned how much His Majesty loves flowers, so much that he personally travels to different regions to find them, and these gaudy red peonies happen to be a specialty of Jinju. All the other flowers surrounding them were also brought from Jinju, not to mention, one of them was a flower that came from the Shun family's auction house. It was also the very pot that Xiao Junchen was holding when we first met. Hearing my words, Xiao Junchen instinctively glanced at the scarlet peony beside the blooming moonflower. I followed his gaze, my eyes filled with nostalgia. At that time, he was holding a monthly red flower quite similar to this one. I thought to myself, what a kind-hearted person who loves flowers so dearly. Xiao Junchen remained silent, only shifting his gentle gaze toward me. It was the eunuch standing nearby who spoke up with a chuckle. Miss, to tell you the truth, these flowers were personally brought back by His Majesty from Jinju. As the words fell, Xiao Junchen lightly scolded without much severity, loose lips, but I instantly blushed, staring blankly at Xiao Junchen. Your Majesty, this humble girl is not what? Could it be that because I am the emperor, you do not like me? My face flushed crimson with embarrassment, and I quickly shook my head. No, your Majesty is noble and handsome, benevolent and caring for the people. This humble girl has long admired you. Then, are you still willing to marry the one you admire? I looked at Xiao Junchen in shock, not feigned, but genuinely unexpected that he would so readily allow me into the Imperial harem. Your Majesty, this humble girl is willing. I spoke excitedly, my face blooming like peach blossoms. Unable to contain my radiant smile, my eyes seemingly seeing no one but Xiao Junchen. That night, news of the emperor's newly appointed noble consort spread throughout the Imperial harem. With a new beauty in his arms, it was only natural he would spend the night with her. My palace was situated somewhat far from Shu Jilian's, not along the same path, a deliberate arrangement by Xiao Junchen, all because I said I was afraid of incurring the noble consort's displeasure. Xiao Junchen gave me a meaningful glance, then smiled and agreed as well. The imperial in-laws held formidable power, and what the emperor guarded against was far more than just the empress's ministerial family. The imperial concubine's general family was also a threat. It was only because the current grand general was advanced in years, and his successor lacked distinction, that Shu Jilian appeared to receive some favor by comparison. To change this situation, naturally it required someone without power who could only rely on the emperor's authority to turn things around. As the daughter of a merchant, I was naturally the most suitable candidate. Money makes things easier. Powerless yet wealthy, to the emperor, that meant nothing but advantages. The day after favoring me, Xiao Junchen bestowed numerous gifts. He even specially permitted me to summon my family into the palace for a reunion. I naturally understood his implication. Along with the imperial decree to my home came my personal letter. Soon, my parents would enter the palace bearing our Shun family's pledge of allegiance. Shu Jilian, who wanted to reap without sowing, reportedly smashed an entire palace's worth of items that morning. When paying respects to the empress, Shu Jilian, just as I had anticipated, started making trouble for me. A mere merchant's daughter dares to address herself as my sister, her face filled with disdain. Her words simultaneously belittled my status and mocked the empress. Simply because I called her sister while serving tea to the empress, she finally spoke. Noble consort, mind your words. The empress set her teacup down lightly on the table, her gaze sharp as a sword piercing Shu Jilian. The other woman scoffed dismissively, unperturbed, but chose not to speak further. Just after paying my respects and stepping out of the palace hall, I saw her waiting outside with her maidservant. What a clever scheme. I wondered why you agreed to marry Guangyi. Turns out you wanted to use me as a stepping stone to climb into His Majesty's bed. You vile creature, how cunning you are. Your Highness need not demean me so. I merely, before the words had even left my mouth, Shu Jilian slapped me across the face. Don't think that just because His Majesty protects you, you can look down on me. As long as you're not the empress for a single day, you'll never rise above me, you'll only ever be beneath my feet. Shu Jilian stormed off in a huff, Clearly furious, I stood there covering my face, my cheeks burning with pain, yet I smiled. I was only afraid Shu Zhilian wouldn't be angry. The angrier she got, the better. Not only had I failed to keep my promise to my younger brother, but I'd also made an enemy for myself. What's worse, I'd been used by someone else. Because of my sudden appearance, I had unintentionally stolen Shu Zhilian's thunder, making her the target of many people's mockery. If not for His Majesty's verbal decree hinting that she shouldn't lay hands on me, she would have undoubtedly wanted me dead. While I was still stunned, the Empress emerged. Seeing the slap mark on my face, she had someone fetch medicine. Who would have thought you possessed such capabilities? But if you wish to outshine her, you'll need to protect this face of yours. I took the medicine and smiled gratefully. Your Majesty, have you considered what I said earlier? The Empress was taken aback, then laughed. You're quite bold. Why shouldn't I agree? Moreover, this palace mistress has long wanted to kill that wretched woman. A flash of hatred passed through the Empress's eyes. I've always said, money is omnipotent. I used all the Emperor's rewards to bribe the palace servants. With the addition of fine objects brought from home, I learned many palace secrets. One of them was that the Empress had more than just one princess. She had once carried a prince, but the child was stillborn. The instigator of this tragedy was none other than Shu Zhilian. After finally having a son, only to have him killed by Shu Zhilian, and being left unable to conceive again, the Empress would be a fool not to hate Shu Zhilian. But in recent years, the Emperor has been wary of the Zhuang family, forcing the Empress to restrain herself and deliberately play dumb. It wasn't that no one had approached her for collaboration before, but none were suitable. Until I appeared just at the right time, I may lack power and influence, but I possess the Emperor's favor and inexhaustible wealth, and a healthy body capable of bearing imperial heirs. Shortly after my parents entered the palace, news spread that our Shen family had been appointed as imperial merchants. Yet this time, Shu Zhilian made no further disturbances. Because the Shen family was the first to donate 10,000 taels of gold, not only that, Xiao Junchen used this as a pretext to start demanding money from the officials. This time, the disaster relief funds truly reached the common people, and for a while, the public's praise for the Emperor grew significantly. Naturally, Xiao Junchen was overjoyed and visited my palace for several days in a row. When I discovered I was with child, he clapped his hands joyfully and declared, "Double happiness has arrived at our door," elevating me to the rank of joyful consort. One must understand, as a mere merchant's daughter, becoming a noble consort was already an extraordinary honor. This promotion served only to highlight how deeply favored I was by the Emperor. Shu Zhilian ground her teeth in frustration, yet strangely made no move against me, but I didn't believe it. In my past life, she had managed to falsely accuse my parents of crimes they didn't commit and had them beaten to death before I could even react. This time, although I prepared in advance by securing my parents the title of imperial merchants, I still couldn't help worrying. As it turned out, I was right. Within a few days, rumors spread that the porridge distributed by my Shen family contained sand and stones, and the steamed buns were dry and hard, leading to suspicions that our family had embezzled funds. In an instant, the Shen family was thrust onto the knife's edge. Before I could explain to Xiao Junchen, I was blocked on the road. "Young Master Shu, what are you doing in the imperial harem?" I cast a meaningful glance at the emerald jade beside me, and she hastily retreated, trotting away. Shu Guangyi saw it, but his face was full of indifference. "The Emperor is with my sister. He won't be coming. When I took a liking to you, it was your honor. Yet you dared to climb the dragon bed by riding on my sister's coattails. Your audacity is truly remarkable." He spoke as he stepped closer. I shielded my belly and hastily retreated. "Shu Guangyi, no matter what, I am now His Majesty's personally appointed concubine Le. How dare you lay a hand on me?" The other let out a scornful laugh, his eyes raking over me from head to toe. "What, afraid I'd lay hands on you? I'm not that stupid, I'm just furious." Seeing him grit his teeth, something stirred within me. It seemed Shu Guangyi had come to find me on his own, keeping it secret from his imperial consort sister. Indeed, no matter how much Shu Zhilian might dislike me, she wouldn't send her younger brother to directly confront me. After all, not everyone could withstand the Emperor's thunderous wrath. As my thoughts raced, I steadied my mind. If not for Her Highness's intervention, I should have married you by now. Then, I revealed everything about secretly giving Shu Zhilian the medicinal concoction. With clever words, I spun a tale of Shu Zhilian actively pushing me toward the Emperor's side. "Do you take me for a fool? Why would my sister ever let you share the Emperor's favor?" Seeing Shu Guangyi's disbelief, I smiled faintly. Naturally, It's because her ladyship wishes to help young General Shu rise to power. There are certain things she cannot say directly to the emperor, but I can, otherwise. Why do you think your Shu family donated so much money during the recent court officials' collection? That was payment for your brother's official position. Young General Shu was Shu Guangyi's elder brother. Highly regarded at home, yet this playboy Shu Guangyi received constant scoldings at home. I refused to believe Shu Guangyi wasn't jealous. Sure enough, at the mention of his elder brother's name, Shu Guangyi's expression changed. Recently, all officials at court were donating money, and the Shu family certainly didn't escape making substantial contributions. It was a fortune so vast that Shu Guangyi could never squander it in his lifetime, though the three Shu siblings appeared harmonious. Shu Zhilian was constantly pressured by their father to clean up Shu Guangyi's messes, yet Shu Guangyi was always being lectured to learn from his elder brother. Though General Shu Jr. was favored by his family, his abilities fell short, often engaging in corruption and deceit. Within the Shu family, tensions had long simmered. After a long pause, Shu Guangyi finally looked at me with suspicion. "Why are you telling me all this?" I smiled softly and said quietly, "Others may think you incapable. But I don't believe so. I'm certain you'll achieve great things. If you could secretly assist with this disaster relief effort and make some contributions, I'm sure everyone would look at you with new respect. We, after all, share some past affection. Rather than helping your elder brother, I'd prefer to help you." Shu Guangyi indeed took the bait, his gaze toward me softening considerably. With a smile, I took out a jade pendant and told him it was my token. Once he left the palace, someone would seek him out to offer assistance. Holding the pendant, Shu Guangyi hesitated before finally leaving. Moments later, Kui Yu also hurried back. Seeing that I was fine, she breathed a sigh of relief. She was originally a palace maid serving Shu Zhilian. After the matter was exposed and she had nowhere to turn, I pleaded with the emperor to intervene and had her transferred to me. Hearing that she had already informed the eunuch by the emperor's side about the matter, I nodded in relief. The bait has been set, now we just wait for the fish to take the hook. Xiao Junchen had only missed one day visiting my palace when Shu Zhilian came looking for him. At that time, I was tending to flowers in the Imperial garden. Watching me stroke the flower and then my belly, Shu Zhilian let out a cold laugh. "Does Concubine perhaps think that pregnancy makes you invincible?" She pinched my chin, slapped me across the face, and stared straight into my eyes. "Let me remind you, many women in the Imperial harem conceive, but only those who can deliver prove their worth." Guards, Concubine was idly admiring flowers when she accidentally fell and miscarried. She shoved me away, and I staggered backward. Two matrons stepped forward at the command to restrain me, raising their feet to kick at my stomach. My gaze sharpened as I hurried to speak. "Your Majesty, if you want the antidote, you must release me." Shu Zhilian narrowed her eyes, casting a dark glare in my direction. "You poisoned me." She clearly didn't believe it. That medicine was examined by the imperial physician. It wasn't poisonous at all. "This is just your excuse to stay alive." I didn't feel the slightest guilt. Instead, I smiled and slowly spoke while staring at Shu Zhilian. "If the medicine wasn't poisonous, why has your highness been suffering from unbearable abdominal pain and frequent bleeding these past few days?" Shu Zhilian's face instantly turned pale as she glared at me fiercely. "You vile wretch, hand over the antidote, then I must ask your highness to release this concubine first." With bloodshot eyes, Shu Zhilian stared at me before finally nodding in agreement. The moment I broke free, I shoved the two old hags behind me and turned to run. "There was never any antidote. I lied to you, just wait to die." Shu Zhilian flew into a rage and ordered people to chase after me. I deliberately made myself look utterly wretched, and just as they were about to catch up, I spotted that bright yellow robe hem and threw myself straight at it. "Your Majesty, save me, Your Majesty, my sister is trying to kill our child." Shu Zhilian's face froze the moment she heard these words. "Your Majesty, I would never." She's lying through her teeth. Hearing this, I let my tears fall and deliberately revealed my injured face. Xiao Junchen's face darkened instantly. He wanted to say something but suddenly started coughing. I quickly patted his back to help him breathe, my heart aching so much that tears began to fall. Xiao Junchen grabbed my hand firmly, his gaze stern as he looked at Shu Zhilian. "How long are you going to keep acting this willful?" Shu Zhilian finally saw clearly. Xiao Junchen was surrounded by a large crowd of people. Among them were many of her own palace attendants. "Held captive? Why, Your Majesty?" She froze in shock. "I know everything you've done. I thought you had committed this grave mistake in a moment of folly, but I never imagined you would dare lay hands on Consort La's child. I can no longer keep you. By imperial decree, Strip her of her noble consort title and banish her to the cold palace. Before Shu Zhilian could react, eunuch stepped forward to seize her. Your Majesty, this concubine is wronged, Your Majesty. Consort La is merely the daughter of a petty merchant. Would you truly depose this concubine for her sake, Your Majesty? Shu Zhilian's voice grew increasingly distant, yet Xiao Junchen's expression remained utterly unchanged. The queen and I exchanged a glance, both seeing joy reflected in each other's eyes as she hurried over. Only after everyone had left did Xiao Junchen pull me into his embrace. Jinna, you've suffered these past days. I buried my face in his chest. Shaking my head with a sweet smile, I'm honored to assist Your Majesty. Jinna feels no grievance. How could there be any grievance? This was all part of the plan. The Shu family had grown too prominent, using the imperial consort status to amass wealth relentlessly, and I merely discovered and reported it. Shu Guangyi, holding my jade pendant and with helpers at his disposal, recklessly meddled in disaster relief efforts. Naturally, he was bound to fall because of it. The Shu family members were all too greedy. Faced with gleaming silver, how could they resist dipping their hands in? Xiao Junchen had long wanted to take action against the Shu family, but had never found a proper reason. Shu Guangyi's reckless way of doing things, always starting without considering the consequences, made it all too easy to catch his mistakes. Moreover, Shu Zhilian's secret scheme of having people mix sand and stones into the porridge distributed by our family became the final straw that broke the Shu family's back. How foolish she was. That porridge, though bearing my family's name, was distributed under the imperial authority. The gravel incident didn't just disgrace my family, it tarnished the dignity of the imperial house. Xiao Junchen, how could he not hate me? And now? The gravel controversy has been quelled by my reasoning that the starving won't reject gravel-laden food, while it prevents the well-fed from falsely claiming rations. The people's hearts were settled, and she carried the imperial heir in her womb. Xiao Junchen naturally held me in even higher regard, but now, with corruption, tarnishing the royal family's reputation, and moreover, holding military power, Xiao Junchen could not tolerate the Shu family for another moment. Xiao Junchen might not be unaware of today's truth, but he merely wanted to use my hand to eradicate the Shu family. Tug one hair, and the whole body moves. If the Shu family falls, their dependents naturally won't fare well. Following the vine to the melon, shockingly half the people were implicated. Xiao Junchen struggled with his illness for several months while handling affairs, yet still couldn't completely resolve them. When news arrived that General Shu's son had led troops to raid the prison, he was so enraged he coughed up blood. Fortunately, the Prime Minister and General Feihong stepped forward, finally stabilizing the situation. Meanwhile, I sat beside Xiao Junchen with my heavily pregnant belly, feeding him medicine. Your Majesty, my tears welled up, hovering on the brink of falling. Eunuch Liu by my side also wiped his tears. Xiao Junchen took a sip of medicine, aware of his constraints, and suddenly grasped my hand tightly. Jinna, the Empress's faction harbors sinister ambitions, but she won't act rashly against you. Now, you're all I have left. I want you to. He was about to speak when I suddenly covered his mouth, my face filled with panic. Your Majesty, beware of eavesdroppers. Xiao Junchen let out a cold laugh. Don't worry. What if she finds out? Without my imperial decree, her Zhuang family would be nothing but traitors. As he spoke, Xiao Junchen took out a jade pendant and a piece of brocade, instructing me to deliver them to General Angua, who was guarding the border. General Angua is my secretly cultivated confidant. With this token, command him to exterminate all the traitors of the Zhuang family. After saying this, Xiao Junchen's coughing grew even more severe. I quickly fed him medicine with concern and wiped his face. He gave me a relieved glance before sinking back into deep sleep. I stood up and exchanged a knowing smile with Eunuch Liu. Though I wasn't the one who administered the poison, I played my part in it. The Zhuang family's roots ran deep and their influence was vast. Even though I'd secured official posts for my clansmen, in a short time, it would be utterly impossible to match them. Once I give birth to a prince, who knows if they might eliminate the mother to keep the child. The best course of action, naturally, is to secure protection for myself. For many years, the Shen family has been charitable and benevolent, saving countless lives. Before entering the palace, Eunuch Liu survived on the porridge and rice provided by my Shen family. After he entered the palace, his only sister was cared for by my Shen family for many years. Upon learning of my entry into the palace, Eunuch Liu sought me out on his own initiative. He knelt down and declared, "This servant is willing to serve his benefactor faithfully, even unto death, without regret." After 10 months of pregnancy, I gave birth to a little prince. Upon learning the news, Xiao Junchen mustered his strength and wrote the imperial decree to establish the crown prince. The Zhuang family had been waiting for this very moment and naturally wouldn't lay a hand on Xiao Junchen, but once the decree was issued, who could still be concerned about that? However, just as the banker was about to make his move, he found himself surrounded. "Sister, I knew I wasn't wrong about you," looking at me, still weak from childbirth and the jade pendant in my hand. The Empress smiled. The old Prime Minister also shook his head and sighed. Our Zhuang family never intended to rebel. With these words, he removed his black official's hat. Xiao Junchen was on the verge of death. The court couldn't afford 2 rebellions in succession, otherwise, the various feudal lords might find it hard to restrain themselves. I didn't make things too difficult for the Zhuang family, merely stripping them of their military authority. I also dispatched guards to keep close watch, waiting only for the old chancellor to gradually relinquish his power before allowing him and the Zhuang family to retire peacefully, free from any implication in crimes. With my promise secured, the old chancellor proved sensible, assisting me wholeheartedly in stabilizing the court situation. Half a month later, Xiao Junchen passed away. My child ascended the throne while still in swaddling clothes, in the name of the Empress Dowager. I governed from behind the curtain. To promising young talents, I was generous with promotions. The court gradually stabilized. My position as the Empress Dowager is now secure. Since ancient times, merchants have been considered lowly. The Shun family has achieved such heights that our name will be remembered for generations. I was satisfied. Afterward, the day before Zhuang Mingyu decided to leave the palace under the pretense of entering monastic life, I took her to see Xu Zhilian. After a year in the cold palace, the noble consort's appearance had withered, her face etched with the marks of hardship, all traces of her former pride long vanished. Upon seeing my attire of the Empress Dowager, the venom in her eyes remained undiminished. "I never thought you would be the victor. I underestimated you." I curled my lips. "Xu Zhilian, you were simply too confident in yourself." She thought she could easily manipulate me and control my parents. But she miscalculated. She forgot about Zhuang Mingyu, her sworn enemy. "I've already issued the order to execute the entire Xu family. You're the last one." As for Xu Guangyi, I didn't let him die too easily. I sentenced him to death by 1,000 cuts. They say on the day of the execution, many people gathered outside the execution ground and wept, not for Xu Guangyi, but for their own daughters, whom Xu Guangyi had ruined and killed. Justice, I got it. It was also obtained for those innocent people who died unjustly. Xu Zhilian roared in agony. I merely smiled and turned to look at Zhuang Mingyu behind me. "I've handed the person over to you, do as you please." To embark on the path of cultivation, one must first settle all karmic debts. Without avenging her son's death, she would never truly comprehend the Tao. I turned and walked away. The screams behind her left her heart undisturbed. Past grievances were settled this very day. After a long while, Zhuang Mingyu emerged, her clothes stained with blood. I pointed it out to her, and she smiled indifferently. "To be honest, I'm curious, why do you hate Xu Zhilian even more than I do?" After a long silence, I finally spoke. "Do you believe in past lives?" I slowly told her everything about my previous life. At first, disbelief filled her eyes, but later, she came to accept it. "So it seems I owe my revenge today to your good fortune of being reborn, after entrusting the little princess to my care." Zhuang Mingyu left with a smile. That was the last time I ever saw her. Free from the palace's constraints and the shackles of being a Zhuang family daughter, she lived well, yet she would never leave this imperial palace for the rest of her life. But I have no regrets. The second story, in my past life. After my husband died, my mother-in-law and I lived as widows in the Marquis's mansion for 20 years. We 2 widows held up the sky of the Marquis's mansion, unexpectedly, after our deaths. My husband miraculously came back to life, enjoying the wealth and honor of the Marquis mansion with his beautiful wife and lovely children. Reborn into this life, upon hearing news of my husband's death, I squandered money recklessly every day with my mother-in-law, even helping her find love again. Watching us tarnish the Marquis mansion's reputation, my husband could no longer sit idle and abruptly ended his feigned death, but it was already too late. I pointed at my mother-in-law's new husband and introduced him. "Husband, this is your father." On the day of my mother-in-law's grand wedding to General Qin, my supposedly deceased husband, Heroine, who had been dead for 3 years, suddenly made an appearance, but he didn't use the main entrance. Instead, sneaking in through the back door, he opened my window and whispered softly, "Sia, it's me, Ziran, your husband. I'm not dead, I'm still alive. Let me in." I have something to tell you. His face was full of expectation as he waited for me to let him in. Looking at Heroine's shifty eyes and filthy face, I covered my nose and mouth, shouting loudly, "Someone come quickly, seize this petty thief," pinned to the ground. Heroine struggled and roared furiously, "How dare you? I am your young Marquis, who dares lay hands on me, young Marquis?" The servants exchanged glances, their movements faltering for a moment. I signaled Bijou beside me with my eyes. Bijou immediately spoke up. "What young Marquis? Everyone knows the young Marquis died 3 years ago. Besides, looking like a beggar like you, how dare you claim to be the young Marquis?" After saying this, she quickly had the servants take him away, gagging him in the process. Heroine's filthy face lost its previous arrogance, replaced instead by a trace of panic. I secretly cursed in my heart, "You bastard, you've finally fallen into my hands." Then I straightened my clothes and walked toward the front hall. Today was my mother-in-law's grand wedding day, and no one was allowed to ruin it, not even her own son. Outside the Marquis's residence, General Cheen had already arrived. Although mother-in-law didn't want an extravagant ceremony and had simplified many cumbersome procedures, General Cheen still came with his subordinates, prepared an 8-lifter bridal sedan chair, determined to marry mother-in-law with great pomp and circumstance. As I supported mother-in-law to help her into the sedan chair, she suddenly grasped my hand tightly. "Sire, has that scoundrel Heroine returned?" I gently patted her hand. "Don't worry, I've already locked him up. No one knows his back." Mother-in-law let out a long sigh of relief. "Sire, with you here, I feel much more at ease." Watching mother-in-law leave, my expression turned cold as I summoned Bijou. "Keep the courtyard secure, don't let anyone in. I want to meet our young Marquis." "Yes, young madam, in the dungeon." Heroine became agitated when he saw me arriving, pounding on the door and demanding to be released. "Jiang Sire, you know it's me, why have you locked me up here?" I suppressed the churning nausea in my heart and said in a measured tone, "Naturally, it's to avoid causing trouble. After all, everyone knows the young Marquis died on the battlefield 3 years ago. Now that you've suddenly returned alive, it wouldn't be good if those with ulterior motives found out." After speaking, I ordered him to be released. Once Heroine was out, he flexed his wrists and sat down beside me, picking up a cup of water to drink. His movements were even more uncouth than before. I couldn't help but frown. He didn't notice, instead asking warmly, "Where's my mother? Why is the mansion decorated with lanterns and banners? Is there some celebration?" I didn't answer directly but countered with a question. "You've been dead for 3 years, how did you suddenly come back to life?" "I heard the Marquis's residence was celebrating something outside, thought you might be remarrying, so I rushed back to find out the truth." After sizing me up, Heroine said, "Seems I was mistaken, you don't look married at all, must be idle gossip going around. I know our love runs deep. Sire, I knew you wouldn't betray me by remarrying." Heroine gazed at me with burning intensity. I lowered my head to drink water, hiding the disgust in my eyes. "In my past life, Heroine faked his death and abandoned the vast marquisate to me and his mother. For 20 years, my mother-in-law and I lived as widows in the Marquis's household, toiling tirelessly to manage its affairs. Only after death did I discover that Heroine had actually faked his demise. After our deaths, he returned to the Marquis's household with his beloved wife and young child, basking in its wealth and splendor. This time, I will never give him that opportunity again." At this thought, I pinched my thigh and, with reddened eyes, feigned fragility. "Since the Marquis isn't dead, why hasn't he returned even once in these 3 years?" Heroine flusteredly began to explain. I was injured on the battlefield, lost my memory, and was taken in by a farming family. Only recently did I regain my memory, and upon hearing the Marquis's household was celebrating that my wife was to remarry another, I rushed back in haste. The lie was so clumsy that I couldn't be bothered to expose him. I merely mocked him in my heart. "Fool. This Marquis estate doesn't have only me as its lady. Couldn't the one remarrying with grand celebrations be your own mother?" Using the excuse that the situation remained unclear and that ill-intentioned people might seize the opportunity to make trouble for the Marquis estate, I had him temporarily confined in the dungeon. Heroine looked troubled. "Stay for a while. How many days exactly? I can't just keep living in this godforsaken place, can I?" I pretended to reassure him. "Your mother won't be back for a few days. At least wait until she returns so we can discuss what to do next together." When I mentioned his mother, he reluctantly agreed. "Fine, I'll endure it for a few days then, until mother comes back." I was about to leave when he grabbed me. "Have someone clean this place up, then bring me fresh bedding and some food." "Fine, I instructed the gatekeeper in charge to fulfill his requests exactly, but under no circumstances was he to be allowed to leave this place. I had more important matters to attend to and couldn't let him interfere with me. The next day, mother-in-law returned. She wasn't in a hurry to see Heroine. Instead, she pulled me aside and handed me a list. "Sire, why did you add so many things to my dowry? When my mother-in-law was getting married, I added half of the Marquis's estate to the dowry she had originally brought with her. Mother, this is what you deserve. The old Marquis passed away early, and you've been managing the entire household all these years. It's only right to give you half of the wealth. Besides, I feel more at ease knowing the money is with you," my mother-in-law anxiously said. "But what about you and a man? How will you manage in the future? This is just reckless." I comforted her. "Mother, a starved camel is still bigger than a horse. How could such a grand Marquis household let us go hungry?" My mother-in-law shook her head. "Though the Marquis estate is large, its expenses are many. You don't know how in my past life I even had to pour my own dowry into maintaining this household. If it weren't for that irresponsible scoundrel Heroine, who pretended to be dead for 20 years, we mother and daughter wouldn't have suffered so much." At the mention of Heroine, my mother-in-law ground her back teeth so hard they nearly cracked. "Yes, mother-in-law has also been reborn. Our hatred for Heroine and the Marquis's household is the same." I brought mother-in-law with me to the dungeon. Heroine was happily gnawing on a chicken leg, completely devoid of his former noble young master's demeanor. "Mother, it's me, Heroine. You have no idea how much I've missed you these past 3 years." Heroine, with grease still on his lips, burrowed into his mother-in-law's embrace. But the old woman was utterly repulsed. She took a step back and sat down on a chair, asking coldly, "If you missed me so much, why didn't you write me a single letter in 3 years? If you won't write for me, fine. Have you forgotten you have a wife and children in the capital?" Heroine simply thought her mother-in-law was grumbling after being deceived. Completely missing the disgust in her tone, she casually repeated the same lie she'd told me earlier to her mother-in-law. "So you're saying you've regained your memory now and want to return as the young Marquis?" "Mother, I wouldn't dare." Heroine lowered her head. It turned out that back then, he had disobeyed his commander's orders, led troops into battle privately, suffered defeat, and fearing punishment, faked his death to escape. The mother-in-law practically ground her teeth as she forced out the words through clenched jaws. "Then how long do you plan to keep hiding?" Heroine's eyes gleamed with calculation. "After another 3 to 5 years. When everyone's forgotten about this matter, I'll quietly return. Have you ever considered how we, you, the child, and I, widows and orphans without a man's support, are supposed to keep the Marquis's household alive?" The mother-in-law slammed her hand on the table. "Heroine, you've disappointed me so much. How could I have given birth to such a spineless fool like you? A man, there is a man. Sire gave birth to a son, didn't she? Let that child inherit the title and become the young Marquis. Problem solved." Heroine said nonchalantly, feigning surprise. I then added with a hint of regret, "But my lord, I gave birth to a daughter, not a son." Tilda. Now it was Heroine's turn to be shocked as he looked at his mother-in-law in confusion. "Mother, didn't we agree before I went off to war? Sire must bear a son." Exchanging glances with me, mother-in-law looked at him disdainfully. "Whether it's a boy or girl isn't something I can decide. If Sire gave birth to a daughter, then it's a daughter. Do you expect me to perform magic? In my past life, when I gave birth to my daughter, a man." News arrived from the front lines. Heroine had died in battle. The grandmother, worried that the Marquisate would have no heir and thus no son to inherit the title, concealed the fact that a man was a girl from the outside world, making her live disguised as a boy since childhood. Poor Aman had to shoulder the burden of inheriting the Marquisate from a young age. To earn military merits for the title, she went to battlefields at just 14, in her past life. Heroine also relied on Aman's military achievements to shed the charge of feigning death after defeat, allowing him to return to the Marquisate and live in luxury. But in this life, after Aman was born, the grandmother did not conceal Aman's identity. The burden of the Marquisate shouldn't fall on Aman's shoulders. If we end up in poverty, so be it, it doesn't matter. By my bedside, my mother-in-law said, "Life and death are fated. Wealth and honor come from heaven. Since it's a daughter, we shouldn't defy the will of heaven." Only then did I realize that my mother-in-law, like me, had been reborn, no son. Then what about the Marquisate's title? Will no one inherit it? Upon hearing this, Heroine was utterly dismayed. My mother-in-law and I, 2 widows, held up the Marquis's household together, facing all the gossip and slander. He felt no pity. His daughter had to disguise herself as a man her whole life, without freedom. He felt no pity, hearing that no one would inherit the title. His future prospects vanished, now his heart ached. He didn't even mention his daughter once. This daughter he had never met was nothing more than a tool in his eyes. Thanks to His Majesty's grace, though the title is lost, the palace has decreed to bestow upon a man the rank of county princess. I took a sip of tea and continued, in the future, when you, my husband, return from faking your death, being the father of a county princess won't be so bad. Heroine slumped to the ground, muttering incoherently, my title is gone, gone, everything's gone. As it turned out, her mother-in-law had personally gone to the palace to request this. The emperor was more than willing to revoke a military-earned peerage in exchange for the hollow honor of a county princess. He issued the decree that very day, when the mother-in-law returned with the imperial edict. Her face was alight with vengeful satisfaction. The old one sucked my blood dry, and the young one followed suit. Let's see how long he lasts without his precious title. Now seeing Heroine in such a despondent state, I feared my mother-in-law might soften and change her mind. After all, he was her own flesh and blood. Yet, to my surprise, her expression remained unchanged as she poured herself a cup of tea and began sipping it leisurely. My child. Who could have guessed you were pretending to be dead? You didn't tell us in advance, and when the news of your death suddenly came, we hadn't prepared any countermeasures. We could only take things one step at a time. You have no idea what kind of life we've lived these past few years. Managing everything inside and outside the Marquis's residence has turned my hair white. My mother-in-law's high-sounding words truly shocked me. What kind of life have we been living these past few years? Naturally, it's been the good life, feasting on delicacies, spending money like water, with both wealth and leisure, and not a single man hovering around. Couldn't be more comfortable. Her skin was smooth, her hair jet black, showing no trace of her 40 years. I wasn't idle either. I used the Marquis's official accounts to buy a pile of gold, silver, and fine goods, stashing it all in my own pockets, just waiting for the day I could make a run for it. Over there. Heroine finally finished wailing and crawled on his knees to his mother's side. Mother, what should I do now? He asked. His mother subtly shook him off and said leisurely, just do as you did before, hide quietly. But things are different now. I was counting on Cie's child inheriting the title to secure a way out for me. But that path is gone. Even if I return someday, I'll have to live in secrecy. Live in secrecy. What else do you expect? Surely you don't think you can return openly and resume being the Marquis? The old lady's voice dripped with disdain. I clenched my fists until my palms turned red. So he'd been scheming against us from the very beginning, letting a man inherit the title, having us support a man in upholding the Marquisate, only for him to swoop in and reap the rewards. Noticing my expression darken, the old lady patted me gently and shook her head, signaling me to watch her handle this. I actually have another idea here. Heroine's eyes lit up. Mother, quickly tell me what to do. General Qin will return to the border after the new year. I'll have him take you along. We'll stage a scene later, claiming you were found on the battlefield, and then you can return with the army. With General Qin's guarantee, His Majesty certainly won't punish you severely. At the mention of General Qin's name, Heroine shuddered. After all, it was under his command that Heroine had committed that foolish act, so he naturally felt quite guilty. Would General Qin be willing to help me? Heroine lacked confidence. The old woman pursed her lips in a smile. With me speaking up, he'll naturally give me some face. Heroine didn't doubt her words and begged the old woman to quickly seek General Qin's assistance. The old woman arranged for someone to take Heroine to the general's residence, and I followed along. On the way, Heroine asked several times why General Qin would help Grandma, but both Grandma and I just smiled without answering. You'll understand when we get there. Inside the general's residence, I pointed at General Qin and introduced him to Heroine. Darling, General Qin has already married Mother. By that logic, you should call him father now. The mother-in-law nodded in agreement from the side. Heroine, by seniority, you really should call him father. Heroine stood thunderstruck, his mouth hanging open in disbelief at what he'd just heard. So when the Marquis's wife got married the other day, that wife was you? Mother, how could you remarry? If you marry someone else, what does that make my father? How can you treat the Marquis's household this way? Her mother-in-law looked at him with disgust. What does your father count for? Your father counts as dead. How many years has it been since he died? Do you expect me to stay a widow for the rest of my life? Before I even married into the family, I'd heard that my mother-in-law and General Qin were childhood sweethearts. Later, her parents, coveting the Marquis's power, tore the couple apart and married her off to Heroine's father. Who would have thought Heroine's father would turn out to be utterly useless? indulging in pleasure and squandering the Marquis's fortune until my mother-in-law had to use her own dowry to fill the financial holes, after finally raising her son to adulthood. Just when he reached the age to make his mark in the world, he faked his death and went into hiding. How could this not infuriate the mother-in-law? It felt like she'd been cheated by 2 generations of the Hu family. Seeing her mother-in-law's dark expression, General Qin immediately grew displeased. Anyone with eyes can see how many sacrifices Peilan has made for your He family. Must a bright and beautiful flower wither and die in your He family, you cowardly wretch? Fleeing from the battlefield, yet daring to spout nonsense before your own mother. Today, I'll teach you a proper lesson on Peilan's behalf. With that, General Qin picked up the broadsword beside him and swung it straight at Heroine's head. The sudden movement startled everyone, and Heroine's knees buckled, sending him straight to the ground. I quickly stepped forward to intervene. General Qin, scaring him is enough. After all, his mother's own son. If you kill him, mother won't be happy either. Although mother-in-law was displeased with Heroine's actions, taking his life would likely create a rift between her and General Qin. Hearing this, General Qin withdrew his hand. For your mother's sake, I'll spare you this time, you little brat. Heroine collapsed onto the ground, his face deathly pale. I pulled General Qin aside and explained the reason for my visit today. The plan I had previously discussed with Heroine was actually a deception. In truth, my mother-in-law and I hoped General Qin would take him to the borderlands and keep him under surveillance. The Marquis's estate doesn't need such a young master, and a man doesn't need such a father. Heroine appearing before the public would only bring shame to the Marquis's household. General Qin looked at the elderly lady and asked with concern, "Does Peilan think the same way? After all, he is her own son." "Naturally, I agree, I've wronged a man, this child," the elderly lady spoke up upon hearing our conversation. General Qin didn't understand the underlying meaning and simply thought the elderly lady was doting on her granddaughter. But I knew what the elderly lady meant. In our past life, a man disguised herself as a man to go to the battlefield, earning military merits through blood and sweat, enduring countless wounds, all to uphold the honor of the Marquis's household. Her useless father didn't deserve this honor. With her mother-in-law's approval, General Qin naturally agreed, waiting only for spring to take Heroine to the front lines together. During this time, Heroine would stay at the Qin residence to avoid any complications. Unaware of our plans, Heroine thought better days were coming and gradually became bold enough to overstep his bounds with General Qin. That day, General Qin sent someone to inform me that Heroine had been sneaking out frequently in the middle of the night these past few days. The messenger handed me an address. "I've made inquiries. A young woman lives here with a child, who seems to be just over a year old." As soon as these words were spoken, I knew it was the beloved wife and young child Heroine had brought back from his past life. It was hidden right in the capital, right under my nose. It's time I properly met them. Following the address, I arrived at a modest one-courtyard house. From the outside, it looked utterly ordinary, even somewhat shabby. Seems Heroine was really strapped for cash. I spent a fortune to buy the adjacent houses on both sides, stationing people to monitor them day and night, reporting every single detail to me. I actually stumbled upon something truly astonishing. This woman was named Wen Nian. Wen was the royal surname of Southern Jew. So this Wen Nian must have been at least a princess or noblewoman, someone of imperial lineage. After Southern Jew was conquered by General Qin and his forces, all members of the royal family were taken into custody. Heroine must have eaten the heart of a bear and the gall of a leopard. How dare he hide a member of the Southern Jew royal family and even father a child with her? Now, he's grown even bolder, bringing her right under the emperor's nose. He must be out of his mind. After I told my mother-in-law everything, she gasped sharply and then cursed furiously. If he wants to die, he can die alone. How dare he bring her to the capital? Does he want to drag our entire family down with him? What sin did I commit in my past life to give birth to such a scourge? I tried to comfort her. "Mother, don't panic yet. This matter hasn't become widely known, there's still room to maneuver." General Qin also advised. "Yes, Peilan, don't rush. Let's think about how to resolve this matter first." After much persuasion, we finally managed to stop the old lady from going to kill Heroine. General Qin pulled me outside and asked me what I planned to do. "I'll first try to sound out Heroine and see if he knows Wen Nian's true identity, General Qin. I'd also like to trouble you to investigate whether Wen Nian has any connections behind her, if she turns out to be a spy from Southern Jew. This matter could become extremely serious." General Qin nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking. What are the odds that royalty from southern Jew would coincidentally be with our soldiers? There must be something fishy going on. I went straight to Heroine's room and asked him point blank, "Did you bring a woman to the capital?" Heroine was about to make excuses when he froze at the sight of the baby clothes in my hand. "What have you done to Twanzi?" I shook the clothes in my hand and sat down. "So the child is called Twanzi. What do you think I would do to Twanzi?" Heroine bit his lip, walked over to me, and half knelt down. "Sire, I know you're the kindest person and would never harm a child. I spoke out of turn just now." I ran my fingers over the garment. The stitches were tight and even, evidence of his mother's skilled needlework. "Heroine, you've been back for months and haven't once asked about our daughter when she was born. What her name is. I thought you'd simply forgotten. But now I realize you never cared about our child at all. Did you?" Heroine's face instantly paled as he stammered, How could I not care? I just forgot momentarily. After all, she wasn't even born when I left for the campaign." Listening to his lame excuse, I interrupted him. "This child's mother's surname is Wen. Is she from southern Jew?" Heroine's face instantly turned pale. "What do you already know?" "Nyen is just an ordinary person, not royalty." "Oh Tilda, so she really is a princess of southern Jew." Seeing that I had uncovered the truth, Heroine knelt down and crawled to my feet. "Sire, though Nyen is a princess, she's an unloved one. Her background is truly pitiful. Please spare them, pretend you know nothing." "All right, I'll take them away from the capital right now, never to return, never to appear before you again. How about that?" As it turned out, Heroine had encountered the fleeing Wen Nyen at the border. Heartbroken by her plight, he hid her in a nearby village, then faked his own death to elope with her, intending to live as carefree as immortals. With tears and snot streaming down his face, Heroine poured out their love story before me. I didn't listen to a single word. Seizing the moment, I had General Qin's men enter, restrain Heroine, and seal all the doors and windows. Heroine was locked in the room. Shouting at the top of his lungs, "Jiang Xie, what are you doing? Let me out right now, young Marquis. Just stay inside peacefully until spring arrives. I'll handle those peach blossoms outside for you. Jiang Xie, if you dare lay a finger on Nyen or Twanzi, I'll haunt you even as a ghost." Listening to Heroine's threats, I scoffed. "Then you'd better turn into a vengeful spirit. Ordinary ghosts don't scare me at all." At Wen Nyen's place, General Qin had also stationed guards day and night, but no unusual activity was detected. General Qin was perplexed. "Sire, don't you think this is strange? I've had people watching her for over half a month, yet she hasn't even stepped outside her door, spending every day at home playing with her child. Could it be that these two are truly in love?" After a moment's thought, I suggested, "Have someone deliver her a message saying Heroine has been imprisoned, and see how she reacts." The messenger soldier said that when Nyen learned Heroine had been imprisoned, her face filled with terror, her body trembling uncontrollably as she kept asking where he was being held. The soldier then told her that if she wanted to know, she should come to the Marquis's residence to find the young madam. I waited at the Marquis's residence for 2 days before when Nyen finally arrived with her child. The moment she saw me, she knelt down. Showing no trace of the dignity befitting a former imperial princess, Nyen pays her respects to elder sister. "Oh, so you knew of my existence. Did Heroine even tell you that he was already married?" I sat high in the host's seat, scrutinizing her with my gaze. The little child couldn't sit still, looking at this one moment and touching that the next, so I had the nanny take the child outside to play. When Nyen paled, clutching the child tightly, I chuckled lightly. "I'm not despicable enough to harm a child. We'll return them to you after we finish our conversation." Only then did Nyen release her grip, though she kept glancing outside anxiously. I came straight to the point and told her that Heroine would be sent back to the border by us, and that this marquisate would have nothing to do with him from now on, nor with her and her child. "How could that be?" When Nyen exclaimed in surprise, "Heroine never told me that. He said as long as he returned, this marquisate would be his." "Don't try to deceive me, madam. After all, Heroine is still the young marquis. In a few years when he returns, as long as everything is explained clearly, won't this marquisate have to welcome him back?" How laughable. These two have been hiding in the mountains for 3 years. They probably don't realize the marquisate has already undergone drastic changes. I took a sip of tea and said leisurely, "Who said this marquis's manor is his? He's dead, and with no son to inherit the title. How could this manor still be his?" "You're talking nonsense. If this manor isn't his, then is it yours?" When Nyen grew agitated, "Of course it's not mine either. I'm just staying here temporarily. If you don't believe me, I'll take you for a tour." Naturally, I wasn't lying to her. After His Majesty conferred upon a man the title of County Princess, he also granted her a fiefdom. Once my mother-in-law leaves with General Qin, I will take a man to live in the fiefdom. The Marquis's estate will be returned to His Majesty for his disposal. When Nian Nian followed me around the estate and saw the packed luggage everywhere, finally believing half of it, it wasn't until I produced the Imperial decree that she completely collapsed to the ground. How could this be? If Heroine deceived me, then what were these 3 years I spent following him through the mountains? What were they? Just proof of your foolishness, Tilda. Having learned my lesson from my past life, I naturally wouldn't give Heroine another chance to come back and suck me dry. I'll separate everything in the Marquis's household from our man, letting our man live her own life. Now that I've told you the truth, what do you plan to do? I calmly watched when Nian Nian lose her mind. Where is Heroine? I want to ask him face to face what exactly happened, when Nian Nian was indeed the princess of southern Ju. But she had been neglected since childhood. When the royal family was captured by General Qin, she secretly escaped and coincidentally encountered Heroine, who was deserting the battlefield. The two misfits took a liking to each other and agreed to hide together in the mountains. Heroine said that if they could hold out for a few years until the commotion died down, he would secretly take Nian Nian back to the Marquis's residence, where they could live a life of luxury. When Nian Nian had only just accompanied him through the hardships of mountain life, never expecting that upon their return, the entire Marquis's household would be turned upside down, I sent someone to escort Nian Nian to Heroine. Heroine's eyes lit up at the sight of Nian Nian. Nian Nian, what brings you here? To everyone's surprise, Nian Nian immediately slapped him. Heroine, you liar, after learning that the Marquis's estate was gone. Heroine couldn't hold back either. He rushed over, grabbed me, and started shaking me violently. Jiang Xie, have you lost your mind? How could you fail to protect even the Marquis's estate? My mother-in-law hurried over and slapped Heroine across the face again. The one who's lost his mind is you. Whether the Marquis's estate survives or not has nothing to do with us, mother and daughter. We're not even surnamed He. You want to preserve the Marquis's household. Yet you pretend to be dead, always blaming heaven, earth, and others. Take your filthy hands off her. Don't touch Xie. My mother-in-law shielded me behind her, casting a disdainful glance at the two before us. Truly, every pot finds its matching lid. One covets life, the other covets wealth. Heroine, hearing his own mother not siding with him, stomped his feet in fury. I'm your own flesh and blood. She's an outsider, yet you'd scold me like this for her sake. What's all this talk about outsiders? For all these years, it's been Xie by my side. We've managed the Marquis's household together and faced difficulties together. As for you, what does being a blood son matter when you're nothing but a coward? Heroine tried to step forward, but General Qin sent men to block him. When Nian Nian and the child were locked up together, the guards reported that the two quarreled day and night, constantly blaming each other. While the child cried incessantly from fright, we simply pretended not to hear, waiting only for the spring campaign when the army would march out and take them all away. The time for parting has finally come. Mother-in-law is going to the border with General Qin. I told her to come back if she finds it uncomfortable, and that our man and I would be waiting for her in the fiefdom. General Qin looked at me warily. Girl Xie, don't you dare steal my wife. Mother-in-law burst into laughter and punched General Qin. Stop fooling around at your age. Then she handed me a box. Inside are the deeds to my shops in the capital. This is the seal. I've already given instructions. Once the rents are collected, they'll be sent to you. I repeatedly waved my hands in refusal, but she pressed them down and forced the box into my arms. A man is still young. You'll have more expenses than I do. Money never burns your hands. It's always good to have extra. She then picked up a man and placed a golden necklace around her neck. A man, Grandma will make time to visit you more often in the future. Don't forget about me, okay Tilda? A man hugged her grandmother's face and planted a big kiss. A man loves Grandma. Everyone burst into laughter. Heroine, and when Nian Nian's carriage was at the very back, I led a man to the front of the carriage and picked him up. Heroine pulled aside the curtain with a grim expression, momentarily stunned when he saw me holding a man. Mother, who is this? He's nobody important. You don't need to remember him. Jiang Xie, you. Heroine was furious, but facing a man, he couldn't bring himself to say anything. From inside the carriage came Nian Nian's sarcastic voice. Well, if it isn't the county princess, what's the matter? Can't bear to part with her, young Marquis. Heroine gave Shun and a man a deep look, dropped the curtain, and began arguing with Nian Nian. General Qin sent a letter saying he had detained Heroine's entire family in a village near the military camp. They would never be allowed to return to the capital in this lifetime. Some time later, General Qin reported that when Nian had escaped, leaving the child behind, Heroine was struggling terribly raising the child alone. General Qin had ordered no one to help. So the villagers all turned a cold shoulder. Heroine ran to beg her mother-in-law for help, but the old woman just shoved 2 steamed buns at her, enough to keep her from starving, and refused to listen to any other requests. After receiving the letter, I burned it as soon as I finished reading. A man came running with a paper kite, asking if I wanted to play together. I tapped her nose affectionately and said dotingly, "All right, mother will play with you, how wonderful, this time." 5-year-old man could play without a care in the world.